And I'm going to move on now and invite our panelists each to make a short presentation. And I'll begin by introducing our first panelist, who is Brother Martin Kenneally, a presentation brother from Cork. And just to say a little about Martin, Martin has a history and has a lot of experience in education at primary and post-primary level. He also has a background in theology, and he was congregation leader of the Presentation Brothers for 12 years. And when he completed his term as leader, he began a project called the LEAF Project. And this project is about leadership education and giving young people opportunities for training and gaining experience in leadership. And also it stresses faith formation. In other words, preparing young people to be influences in society from a faith basis. So Martin, you're very welcome, and we look forward to hearing your experience of how advocacy has become a pillar of Presentation Brother ministry and mission. Over to you, Martin.
Well, thanks very much, Kevin. And I'd like to thank you, Kevin, and the ERI team for giving me the invitation to be part of this Zoom seminar this morning, and to say hello to everyone from wherever you're joining us in the world. This in itself is an example. So many people joining here are creating awareness, networking, and exploring ways in which advocacy in the 21st century is becoming a pillar of mission for so many congregations and for so many other faith-based organizations. I just note that as we gather today, we're experiencing war and violence in many parts of the world. And here in Europe, millions of people are fleeing a brutal war in Ukraine. And many faith-based groups and so on are reaching out with food and aid and shelter. However, in itself, it shows that unless there is systemic change, unless there's a kind of a global conversion to advocacy for peace and justice, how can we prevent future wars? Interestingly enough, the Russian writer Anton Chekhov says that all great literature can be summarized in two fundamental themes. And the themes are: a person sets out on a journey, or a stranger comes to town. And I'm going to be talking about 3 points today: setting out on the journey of advocacy and the strangeness of that journey for many of us. The second point, what underlies the pillar of advocacy, a spirituality for practitioners of advocacy. And the third point, having a kind of an Easter or a resurrection perspective on the work of advocacy. So my first point is about the themes of journey and strangeness. And that's reflected in itself in the story of Edmund Rice International, which was described so well there by Kevin, how the two congregations began this journey so many years ago. And that journey arose out of a discernment at chapters, and the journey is continuing. And it has been a journey, because for those of us in the congregations or in the Edmund Rice Network or Presentation family, I think it's fair to say we were mostly school people. We were mostly frontline educators and involved in mission on the front lines. Most of us with little experience of advocacy, or of engaging in reflection on systemic change, or of influencing change makers. So there's a journey there that we've been making, I think with some successes and also with some setbacks. And the second theme then, a stranger comes to town, because this has been a strange journey for us. We had to learn a new language, the language of advocacy. And as I said, the journey has had moments of progress, moments of setback, and it's far from complete. However, I think we have made progress, and Kevin described it very well there. And advocacy now is becoming more and more embedded in the congregational life and mission and the culture of the congregations. For us as Presentation Brothers, a lead role was taken by a number of brothers, some of them joining us here this morning: Brother Dennis Cleves, Bernard Gaziri, Kevin Mascarenas, among others. And these brothers and many lay people at various times would have been directly involved in ERI as members of the Edmund Rice International team in Geneva, or as part of the effort to raise awareness in different parts of the world around the congregation. And many people from our congregation have engaged with ERI in terms of education and training in Geneva and online and so on. However, as with any real journey or any learning of a new language, this work takes patience and time, and it is still a work in progress. So I move to the second point now. As we speak of advocacy as a pillar of mission, what holds the pillar? What is at the base of the pillar? Why are we doing what we're doing? And this brings us, I think, to the need to do more to develop a deeper spirituality for those involved in the work of advocacy, because it is a long haul. It's tough going at times. The challenges are huge and there are many setbacks. So what will sustain us on the journey? What resources will we need? What type of networking will help us? And where, as faith people, do we find hope? I'd suggest that one way of developing a spirituality for advocacy practitioners is to mine ever more deeply the charism of the founder of your congregation or the founders of your organization. And this Zoom seminar is being held to celebrate the feast on the 5th of May of Blessed Edmund Rice, the founder of the Christian Brothers and the Presentation Brothers. And Edmund Rice International speaks of a faith-based approach to social justice and ecological advocacy. ERI says we are committed to bringing about God's dream for the world and for humanity. And just to take the example of the founder of my organization, and you can apply it to your founder or the people who founded your congregation or organization. For us, Edmund Rice was fundamentally a person of faith with a deep personal relationship with Christ. As a lay person and later as a religious brother, he read the scriptures every day. He reflected on the scriptures. As a leader and as a change maker dealing with business people, with public officials and with legal people, he wrote his most important letters in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, in the chapel. Tradition is that he never left the house without visiting the chapel, and on his return from ministry, he always visited the chapel again. And it seems to me that already present in the lives of many of our founders is a spirituality which can animate even today the work of advocacy. This is what will hold the pillar of advocacy in place and will avoid the fatigue and the burnout which happens to so many good people in ministry. And you know this from your own experience, and you know it from the experience of people in social justice ministry who are battling all the time against the odds. Burnout and fatigue are very real issues, and we need ways to support people and nurture people and deepen spirituality for people. Pope Francis' first great encyclical is called The Joy of the Gospel. And St. Teresa of Calcutta told her followers that it's no use going to poor people with sad faces. I often find myself returning to Brother Leonard O'Toole's book, The Spiritual Profile of Edmund Rice, where he writes, and I quote this, "Edmund certainly emerges as a young man who knew how to enjoy life. We learn of his fondness for stylish clothes, his skill as a horseman, his love of boating, his enjoyment of dancing and of singing. And I think if we wish to draw others, and especially younger people, into the work of advocacy, we must be witnesses to joy, never forgetting that it is about creating systemic change which helps people to live life to the full." So that's the spirituality which is fundamental to the pillar which sustains advocacy and mission. My third point is that the pillar of advocacy, I think, demands a conversion to a different perspective, a new way of seeing things. I remember when ERI was being set up at the beginning, making some initial visits to Geneva with various Christian Brothers and Presentation Brothers, and meeting people from Franciscans International and Mara's Brothers International and groups already in the field, and my eyes just being opened to a whole new perspective. We need a new perspective. There's a story that in an address to the bishops of the Church of England some years back, the theologian Elizabeth Templeton asked the bishops to consider how they would respond to this following scenario. You can think about it now today. She said, you're on a street one day and a person walks up to your bishop and says, my bus leaves in 2 minutes. Tell me about the resurrection in the time remaining. Now, Templeton supplied her own humorous solution. She said, if you really want to hear about the resurrection, be prepared to miss your bus. So maybe we have to miss the bus at times. But the great Anglican theologian, Archbishop Rowan Williams, then suggested a slightly different answer. And he said, and I quote, I think I'd have asked that man in the street where he was going. And then I would have said, I'd accompany him on the journey. And that's what we're about in the work of advocacy as well, accompanying people on the journey. A few years back, the Presentation Brothers had a chapter theme, which was taken from the scriptures, the idea of being on the road to Emmaus, seeing in a new way, finding new hope, being called anew to mission. And it seems to me that advocacy as a pillar of mission demands the same from us, that we see in a new way, that we find new hope, and that we deepen our commitment to mission, which is infused with advocacy. Because once we see the situations confronting us in a resurrection light, our capacity to act will be dramatically changed and enlarged. For many congregations, religious groups and so on, certainly in Europe maybe, there's the whole thing of the end of one form of religious life, the ars moriendi, the graceful ending. But as Christians, wherever there's a death, there's also a resurrection. So we must be seeing the signs of resurrection and also putting energy into that. And certainly for me, the whole thing of advocacy as a pillar of mission is a call. It's a sign of resurrection. It demands our energy and our commitment to the journey and seeing in a new way and engaging people in that and educating young people in it and so on. And I think this is what Edmund Rice International has been about, as Kevin so well described, and what so many of all your congregations and organizations are about as well in doing this great work. And we have to find ways to sustain that and to nurture ourselves into the future. So they're really my 3 points: the journey, the strangeness of it, the spirituality needed for it, and the new resurrection perspective which animates it. And I think this is a great way then of leading into the celebration of the feast of Edmund Rice. So thanks so much for listening to me, and I leave it there for now, and I wish you all a happy feast of Blessed Edmund Rice.
Thank you very much, Martin, for your presentation. And just to mention 1 or 2 things that you highlighted there, I liked very much your mention of the fact that we were involved in systemic change, and that was kind of a new thing for us, and we had to learn a new language and see things in a new way. And you mentioned too, I think, 2 things about the need for a spirituality to base the pillar upon, and secondly, the question that it's patience sometimes is needed, because change doesn't happen quickly. It's like the drop falling on the stone. Gradually, slowly, things will change. So thank you for reminding us about that in your presentation.